there's nothing more impactful than hearing somebody's personal story of their
Yeah.
struggle and overcoming, and, um, so I want the teenagers to, feel free that they can do that, but that's really hard to ask a, 16, 17-year-old. Can you talk about, your panic attacks or whatever? And so
Right.
most of the time, I'm usually getting at people in their 20 to 30-year demographic. But last night, one of the teenagers came up to me and she said, "I'm ready to talk about my eating disorder on the panel." And I'm like, "Wait, what?"
Hello, I am B. Reeves with New Waters Recovery in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to our weekly podcast, Finding New Waters. Our goal in creating Finding New Waters is to provide a resource for families to help navigate the complexities of supporting a loved one struggling with substance use or mental health. When we find ourselves in crisis due to one of these issues, most people have no idea where to turn. We hope to shed some light onto what is often the darkest hour for many families. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Finding New Waters. Sitting here with our CEO, Justin McClendon, and our very special guest, Dr. Elisabeth Liz Willers in Nashville, Tennessee. And my name is B. Reeves. I'm the Director of Business Development at New Waters Recovery. Welcome, Liz.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Thanks
it,
for
the
joining
opportunity.
us. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for being here. So Liz was connected to me and to Justin through our friend and colleague, Jen Hogshead. They went to Carolina together. For those outside the region, that's the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And Liz, besides being a physician in Nashville, has started a foundation in honor of her son. And I just kind of open it up to Liz to tell us about what you do and what the Goldfinch Foundation is all about.
Yeah, sure. So my son Owen died in June, and he died of an unintentional overdose with kind of a cocktail of medications, alcohol, Benadryl, propranolol, which is a medication for social anxiety and panic attacks. And so uh, totally floored me. And prior to that, I had actually been thinking a little bit about my career as a physician and what I'd seen and what I'd been able to accomplish. I was a pulmonary critical care doctor, so ran the intensive care unit during COVID, and as a pulmonologist, a lot of times, dealing with people with fatal disease and talking through death and purpose in life and meaning, and um, had planned to transition to more of a kind of a wellness approach, an kind of a bridge between Western and Eastern medicine, if you will, recognizing we gotta kind of obey the science. There's a reason for medications, but also lifestyle plays such a big role, and I wanted to spend more time with my patients. So I was gonna start my own practice, in 2024, and Owen, was gonna be a big part of it. He had, struggled with a lot of different issues, from ADHD to anxiety. Um, he had OCD, depression. I mean, you name it, the kid struggled. And he also, I don't know whether to term him an alcoholic, but he did abuse alcohol. And, but he was going to be a part of this because he was such a big believer in kind of mental wealth. Um, so he was an artist. So he was going to do my branding logo. But then, he died. And so
Mm.
everything kind of halted, in my life completely. And so, uh, immediately kinda wanted to make something, good out of, something tragic. And, it really wasn't until he was an artist, and I found his, workbook or some, like, kind of notes that he took before, he would create something, and it was all about mental health. It was all about his awareness of his struggles, and, he wanted to portray, the struggles of today's teenager, through art, and it was literally like, I mean, it was like God said, "Okay, here's this, and this is what you need to do." Flipping through, um, his inspiration and his self-awareness and what he wanted to accomplish. It was kind of like a no-brainer. We gotta do this in honor of Owen, carry on what he probably would do if he were still here, you know? So, yeah, started this foundation, which, primarily is focused on empowerment and education. And, I think a lot, especially after COVID, a lot of um, the way I approach crisis or tragedy or bad things is um, really to kind of just stop and not panic and try to say, okay, so what do we know and how can we make things better? And that's how I, practice medicine. It's like, well, let's kind of deal with what we know, and then we can kind of create a plan moving forward. And so I really wanted to talk to the young people because I feel like oftentimes, like, parents will read these books or will listen to podcasts, or, or the schools will have these great speakers, but, you know, oftentimes the teenagers aren't really a part of the equation, and they get kinda sick of, parents or teachers telling what to do, or get off your phones, or, avoid this or that, and I just thought it would be a better approach to, talk to the kids and tell them what we all know, um, and so with when Owen died, in the community, there was a lot of gossip because, we were all shocked. Mom, everybody, of how could this happen? He's a straight A student and, president of the honor council, going to Davidson. I mean, all the things. Great friend. So we're all shocked. And then what happens, I think, when there's a tragedy is that people start to gossip. And it's not in a malicious way. It's just more to separate yourself from that. Oh, that could never happen to us because surely,
Mhm.
you took fentanyl, or surely they did something wrong. And the truth is we didn't, and in full transparency, um, to show our vulnerability. And one of our taglines for the foundation is showing strength and vulnerability, which is a quote from Owen. I just thought I'd start giving talks. So I give talks like, this is Owen's story. This is Owen's story. Any questions? This could happen to you, and I don't want it to. And until we start talking about it being okay to have struggles, um, then we're not gonna beat, this crisis, the mental health crisis. So, I mean, I could go on and on. I don't
No,
wanna,
that's
like,
amazing, and
I
I mean,
yeah.
it's a beautiful thing that you're turning this tragedy into something so positive. And to your point about the gossip and people, the sometimes the knee jerk reaction is to say this would never happen to us. But seeing you, who you're a very smart, accomplished woman who had your son's in private school and by all accounts doing great. He was going to
Mhm.
Davidson. That there's no more evidence that yes, this can happen to you too, than seeing
Right.
somebody like you going through this and being so public about it. So I commend you
Right.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
And
and I mean,
Liz,
we
I
had a
just
great
wanna
relationship too. Go ahead, sorry.
I just didn't wanna gloss over, I'm so incredibly sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
And
you.
as B said, I think, just such a courageous and noble thing for you to channel that into something that hopefully can help a lot of people. So we really, really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was one of those, like, he was just such an amazing person. And I think, going back to my like personality, I guess, as a physician, like, one of the things that I felt like I do well is, like, I figure stuff out. Like, I figure people out. Like, people come in, they're like, oh, I've seen all these doctors. And so I kind of pride myself in being able to fix people. Right.
Okay.
And so the most valuable patient or person in my entire, in my heart, I couldn't fix. And and that was hard for me because, that's kind of what I do, right? We had a great relationship. He told me everything. Um, we have a really close family. He saw set pediatricians. He saw psychiatrists. He saw therapists. He went to a meeting. I mean, he did all the things, and he earnestly wanted to get better.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I don't have any regrets from a personal standpoint, but I had a meeting with some of the teen ambassadors for our foundation last night, and what I told them is that if there could have been anything that could have been different on the night he died, was that he felt he was the only one struggling with so much.
Mhm.
And, and I remember having a conversation with him the week before we were getting ready to go to the beach, Kiowa. He just graduated, and we were gonna do this family trip, and, we get up, and I'm like, "Gotta go to the, airport, 7 o'clock." And I'm like, "Where's Owen? What's he doing?" We're ready, and he's kind of, like, walking around the house kinda like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, "What's going on?" And I leaned in, and smelled like alcohol. I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And he's like, and then we had conversation. He was very upset, kinda on the brink of a panic attack, and I said, "Look, get your stuff together. We'll go to the airport and we'll talk about it." So, of course, I'm talking to psychiatrists and therapists and all the things, and he was drunk. He was still drunk from the night before, and what he had told me is that, he was on social media, and they do the Snapchat. Snapchat is, like, obviously, it's always taking a picture of yourself. So, somebody with body dysmorphia, and you have a hard time looking in the mirror, but you've gotta send your snaps, and he saw his face, and, it triggered a panic attack, and what he needed to do is, like, when those kind of, negative feelings started kind of bombarding his brain, just if I could just get wasted,
Mm.
get drunk, then I can sleep, right? And that's what he did. And I said and we started walking in the airport, and I was like, "Okay." He's like, "I just don't understand why I'm the only person with all of these struggles." And I said, You're not. Izzy, he had a twin sister. I was like, Izzy has anxiety, and, you do have more than your fair share. I mean, I'll be honest with you, you do. But you're not alone, and and but you can say that, but unless he really felt that, he felt alone, and so that night, if he had had going back to that night he died, and, if he had had somebody that he didn't feel so isolated, and somebody he could have reached out to that said, "I know this dude struggles too. I gotta talk to him." 'Cause it's one thing to talk to your mom or your sister, things looks like she's got it all together, but to have had somebody he knew that had just as much in their kind of brain, as he did, I think things could change, and that's what is the idea behind the foundation. It's really we've gotta create a culture change, like, now.
Yeah.
And I think trying to recruit people, of all walks of life we respect and we think are like total badasses. Like, all these athletes that are now coming out with their struggles, like Noah Lyles, Simone Biles. There's like people who are at the height of success when if they can reveal that, hey, I got stuff going on too,
Mhm.
then that's gonna be the way we change culture. So
I
that's
hear
what we're
you.
trying to do.
Yeah.
We talk about it amongst ourselves and even on this podcast often about how, I mean, I'll just speak for myself, how important it was in early sobriety for me to see celebrities who had everything but still chose to live this
Yeah.
way. And I feel like the mental health piece is lagging behind that a little bit, but it is happening. And I agree. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just to be able to normalize it and make it okay to talk about these things and do feel like we have somewhere to go other than, you know, a, just a, the generic teen hotline or the crisis hotline or
Right.
mom or sister or things that just seem basically just kind of there to check a box, but to really feel like we have
Yeah.
somewhere to go. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, exactly, and so I'm lucky enough, that we have a really great community of teens, and I think, um, Owen, like I said, was so well, respected in the community for all of the things that he did, and my younger son, Charlie, is a sophomore, and so I think with that, we've been able to recruit a lot of great, teen ambassadors for the Goldfinch, and we had a meeting last night, and I was telling my sister about it this morning. It was so great. I mean, we because there's so much overlap with addiction and mental illness, right? That's
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the deal. Is and I think you guys have seen the percentages like anywhere from 30 to 50%, but
Mhm.
that's an underestimate, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, you see patient. I mean, they got illness; it's just undiagnosed yet, and so the last night's talk was the first part was all business, but the second part was, I had Owen's therapist come talk. He's got a tremendous amount of experience, in, substance abuse. He used to work for a place called The Ranch. I'm not
Okay.
familiar with
Yeah.
it, but it's in Tennessee, and
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, we're
we
familiar.
just all started talking, and, what was really, really cool is kids asking questions, but what do you do if you see someone struggling, right? So I had the benefit of having Izzy, who was Owen's twin, tell me, "Mom, Owen was was drinking too much or did this or did that." But so many parents don't realize that you might have that kid. You
Yeah.
don't know about it, and the kids know, but but they don't know what to do with that information, right? And so we talked a lot about that. There's there's a certification called QPR. It's, question, persuade, I think, and refer. And teenagers can be a part of it. And they do one for, like, suicide prevention, but they also do one for substance abuse, alcohol and drug. And so one of the things we're doing with the state of Tennessee is actually gonna do some training for our kids, um, to say, "Okay, when you see that person passed out, like, how do you approach the parents? Do you approach your parents? What do you say to that
Mhm.
person?" And so, I'm pretty excited that the resources are there for, us to kinda better educate, you know, the teenagers and young people in the community so that we can, hopefully avoid things like this, Owen's story, in the future.
I think what you guys are doing is great, and I think we need more of that because as you mentioned, I think it really has become I mean, it's an epidemic,
Yeah, totally.
to put it lightly. Um, I think you don't have to look far to see the effects of, everything, right? I mean, just the pressure
Mhm.
for success, the social
Yeah,
media, the social
yes.
relationships. I mean, it's just so, so, so much that's negatively impacting our youth. And to your point, I think that is probably, at least in my limited, knowledge of how to impact that space is, um, it seems like that would be the most effective thing because it seems like this picture of just our youth just kind of stuck in these bubbles and they're just doing what they can and they're just trying to get
Mhm.
through.
Right.
Um, and to your point, a lot of them probably just don't know that they're not the only ones dealing with it. And there does seem to be an overwhelming lack of, preventative measures and education. And I really love the way that you put just trying to engage the kids in conversation because I think we do that so quickly, right, as parents, and
Right.
we try and figure things out or tell them what to do, and it's pretty limited that I'm even thinking about my own 13-year-old and like how often do I
Mhm.
actually engage or elicit feedback from him around the things that we're asking him to do.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I did that through music. I mean, to me, music is, so easy to I mean, I'm not one of those, like I mean, I'm over 50, but I also listen to, like, contemporary music, and I have similar kind of, various different kind of interests and tastes in music, and so that's been something that I could, communicate with the kids, and so one of the things that was really cool and this is again goes back to, like, just being an example for your peers, we started this Instagram account, which I was, like, struggling with because 'cause I'm like, "Social media, but it is what it is, it's there, and so
Yeah.
as long as that we can utilize it for good and not evil, then maybe we should do this. So one of the kids
Right.
said, let's do an advent calendar for December, and each one of us will do a post on the story. And so what we did was we chose a song. And so a kid would, or teenager would choose a song that meant something to them when they struggled and that was uplifting to them. And then they'd send it to me so I could approve it. And then we put on the story and try to tag the artist. Just, who knows, maybe
That's cool.
they might be interested. But I can't tell you how many kids and parents came up to me and were like, "Oh, I wanna be a part of this, like, I wanna do one of those posts," and I'm like, "Well, okay," and I just told them, it started with a group of, like, 20, and now it's 35, um, and just these small little things are really trying to make an impact and, are making an impact. In fact, last night, there was a girl who came up to me, and a lot we were talking about speakers and, there's nothing more impactful than hearing somebody's personal story of their
Yeah.
struggle and overcoming, and, um, so I want the teenagers to, feel free that they can do that, but that's really hard to ask a, 16, 17-year-old. Can you talk about, your panic attacks or whatever? And so
Right.
most of the time I'm usually getting at people in their 20 to 30 year demographic. But last night, one of the teenagers came up to me and she said, "I'm ready to talk about my eating disorder on the panel." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" And I said, "Have you talked to your mom? Are you sure?" She's like, "I'm ready." And then her mom later texted me and said, "Every time you talk about Owen, she feels like you're talking about her. There's so many similarities." And so, I think sometimes, again, going back to my career in medicine, you're like about metrics or let's publish the data and show we're doing something. But to me, sometimes that doing something is just one life,
Yeah.
one mindset you're going to change, and one person that um you know, is changed by hearing your story or conversing with you in some way. I talked to this is a really cool thing that happened to me this week. So, um, I joined Orange Theory, And I don't do
Okay.
I don't really typically back in, when I was working full time as a physician, I didn't really like going to gyms. I had no time. And so we have this great gym in our house. But my daughter who goes to Chapel Hill, I was like, you got to do Orange Theory. It's so great. It's like cardio, all the things. So I was like, I'm going to do it in Nashville. We'll do it together and you'll be in Chapel Hill. So I go to Orange Theory and I'm like, I'm going to join. They're like, oh, are you new to Nashville? And I'm like, no, I've lived here for 25 years. I'm doing this with my daughter, da da da. She's like, "Oh, you're from North Carolina?" "Yeah, I am." "Where are you from?" And I have this thing, I'm like, I went to I grew up in Charlotte, went to Chapel Hill, and then I went to Wake Forest for med school, and, she's like, "I'm from Charlotte, where?" And I said, South Charlotte," and she's like, "Well, I went to Charlotte Catholic." And I was like, "Oh, that's so crazy." And she's like 24 or 5 or something. And I was like, "My niece and nephew, they graduated from Charlotte Catholic. Do you happen to know?" I mentioned my niece's name. And she was like, "No way." She was like, "I was the one responsible for her intervention." So my
Oh,
niece, who I
wow.
mentioned, is actually um, had an alcohol problem in high school, is sober, is thriving, is working at a rehab center in Charlotte.
Oh, that's
And
No
I
amazing.
way.
was like, "This is the deal." I was like, "This is crazy, but, are you still in contact with her?" She's like, "Oh, I'm on Instagram friends with her, and, but we don't, we're not connected anymore." And I said, "Look, you saved her life." And I said, "You." So what happened, and I don't know a lot of the details because my sister was, didn't, tell the whole family or whatever, but there are two of her, this girl I met, and her friend were worried about my niece's drinking. And they went to my sister and said, "She's got a problem." And she is a different person. This is the age of 16. She is a totally thriving, different person, is so involved in the sober community and all this stuff.
That's
And
amazing.
I said, "I'm telling you, you made a difference." And then, of course, I'm like, "Oh, let me tell you about the Goldfinch." And, and I told her about the QPR training. And I was like, "This is what we want kids to feel comfortable with. And if you ever want to be part of the panel, this is it." We're doing the arts and the music. And she's like, "Well, I'm a songwriter." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." And because I wanted, with our foundation, which sets us a little bit different, is that involvement in the arts, the music and the creative writing or songwriting and art appreciation and engagement. I was like, "Would you ever do this?" And she said, "Believe it or not, I've recovered from an eating disorder. I'm a musician. You can come to my concert next month and please share this story, this music song." She wrote a song called Skinnier about her eating disorder. So I shared that with the kids because, and then this started this conversation last night of like, what if I don't want to feel like a tattletale and I don't want to be judging. How do you approach your friend or your friend's family when you see something you're worried about? So it was just kind of a fun discussion, and I told them the story, and of course they asked, "Well, are they still friends?" Because I don't want to ruin my friendship, to rat out somebody, right? And I said, basically, "Well, they are still friends. They're not close." And I said, "You might be, the bad guy initially, but in the long run, you're going to be the hero." And I just love sharing stories like that because the truth is,
Yeah,
she needed to know that, you know, my niece is thriving
that's
because of that
amazing.
one intervention she did 8 years ago. So
That's
anyway,
amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and having
hmm
to be the bad cop, so to speak, it's just something I'm willing to risk,
Yeah.
yes.
because it's out of love and out of care. It's not to punish anybody or rat them out. And it's
Mhm.
hard
Right,
to
or
get
judge
over
them,
that
I think,
sometimes.
too, because none of
Yeah,
us are perfect, right? And so, sometimes that initial "Well, who are you to tell me?"
exactly.
But I just told them, I feel like, and maybe this is the Catholic guilt in me, but I could never live with myself if something happened. Like, you're at a party and
Right.
somebody's wasted and looking for their keys. Well, if they hate you, they hate you, but could you live with yourself if they got behind the car and hurt themselves or somebody else? No.
Yeah.
Then that's kind of like my measure of like, when do you intervene? So hopefully
We
we'll start to make a difference.
Just on that note, a thought came up for me. I mean, we deal with that a lot on, with family members that are dealing with, let's call it the identified patient, right? Whether that's their child or maybe that's, a spouse or anything like that. A lot of times, the family systems, they don't really know what to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they know something needs to change and they see that there's a problem, but the ability or the know-how to kind of directly confront it is difficult. So a lot of times you see these,
Mhm.
I mean, as we anybody's, there's written so many books about this, but like enabling behaviors and things like that.
Right.
So I think, we collectively find ourselves having a lot of those conversations about exactly the point that you just made, is that like
Mhm.
there's a way to do that with love and compassion to confront that problem, but you definitely are not doing anybody any favors by just kind of continuing to dance around the problem and
Right.
not confront it. So
It for sure, and I think the therapist we had last night, he pointed out, like, which is the hard part is, like, every family is different. Every situation is different.
yeah,
But a friend, of mine, who came last night, she said that sometimes just asking a question rather than coming through as, "Hey, you got a problem. I've seen you at parties." More just to say, "Hey, I've seen you at parties. Like, is everything okay at home?"
yeah,
Just a kind of a so the approach is more of, "I care about you," rather than, "This is what you gotta do to fix your
right,
life," was a really good point, I thought, and I'll remember that really in any difficult conversation, right? It doesn't have to be like alcohol use or, and "Are
yeah.
you okay?" I'm, like, worried about, like, how frantic you're running around, or whatever it is, and it's such a great, I think, reminder of how to approach these difficult conversations regardless of what it's about.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said about, needing a cultural shift. And I think that is a small, but a part of that is that, just generally speaking, how we all engage with each other, right? Like,
Mhm.
being afraid that we're going to like hurt somebody's feelings, or that we're going to
Right.
create this like awkward moment. I don't
Right.
know. Is it also a passing opportunity for us to maybe make a difference in somebody's life, right? Uh,
Absolutely. I mean, interestingly, so with the Goldfinch, the approach to mental wellness, of course, like I mentioned, involves the arts, and so nobody likes to talk about improv. Like I've been told when I was so I did theater when I was growing up, and I'm not a thespian, just I did theater, but
oh, cool.
it was a lot of benefit. I see a lot of benefit of that, being able to talk in front of people, or and so I saw my younger son about,
Hmm.
okay, all these activities I want to do with Goldfinch, and we're gonna do this improv class because there's a group, in Nashville that does improv for kids who have social anxiety. And that goes back to your human connectedness, right? Because we're so used to carrying on conversations behind screens or, "Oh, I could say that on Snapchat, but I couldn't really say that in real life, could I?" And so I talked to, the theater teacher at, Owen's school where Charlie attends now, and he said he took this class. It was really more about conversational skills. I mean, it's not improv or acting, but trying to kind of teach all of us how to relate to humans in a more
Mm,
comfortable way. That's missing, and I think with whatever your industry is, AI can do your job unless it can but you can beat them if you figure out how to be human, right?
yeah,
You can beat them by figuring out to talk to people or to, you know, communicate or pick up on details of, conversation or, I was telling somebody with medicine, I'm totally going off track, but
you're
edit this or
fine.
whatever. But in medicine, sometimes like people are like, "Oh, well, AI is gonna be doing that job." And I thought, really, it won't, because I can tell you how many times I just like listen to somebody's cough and I'm like, all right, that's asthma, or
Mm,
or here's someone's story, and it's one of those immeasurable things. Like you can't do, a metric to say, oh, this doctor's the best because they had these fewer complications of this procedure. It's literally this indescribable humanity that when you walk in a room and you're able to read somebody, that's something a computer can never do. And
yeah,
a program can never do. And I think that's going to be a lost art unless we get a little bit more, active in how we're gonna kind of teach all of us to kind of relate to people. I think ideally, you didn't ask me this, B, but, ideally with the foundation in 3 to 5 years, what my hope is that so if you look at the CDC, CDC's definition of health is physical well-being, mental well-being, and social well-being. That's the CDC's definition of health. And so in 3 to 5 years, I'd like to have, like, this brick and mortar where, you come and you're like, "Okay," it's not gonna say no phones because going back to the cliches that people don't wanna talk about no phone. I don't wanna see the rules, but it's gonna be you don't have time to be on your phone because you're gonna be engaged in sound bathing, or you're gonna go listen to a nutrition talk talking about sports performance, and then on the weekends, what I'd like to do is have, like, you know, discussions without judgment of various different young people from different zip codes. Because I think the other thing is, you know, talking about, like, social media and all the things we all get in these little kind of echo chambers, of, like, people who think like, or,
Yeah.
and that happens in real life too. "Oh, I'm on this baseball team, it's travel, and, this is how much it costs." So you're automatically excluding other people. But I was participating in a kind of a town hall with a friend that works for the state of Tennessee, and to hear some of the struggles that teens have, about gang violence. One of the teenagers brought up, "Well, we're struggling because, there are kids who are dying, and then they come in and there's an empty desk and nobody's talking about it. And then that
Oh,
makes everybody so angry, and more gang violence and so isn't that such an interesting perspective that we might not necessarily understand going to private school and worried about how to get into Ivy Leagues and who's getting an SAT tutor. Wouldn't it be cool if we could have like a Friday night, you know, group of 20 just sitting around from different zip codes, just talking, just what are your stressors? What do you do? How can we learn from you? And that kinda goes back to that social well-being or that human connectedness. There's a term, or I guess an idea in sociology called third space, where, I don't know, have y'all ever heard of that kind of description where rather than going from home to school or home to work, where's a space where, not like a church or kind of a common or like a sports team, where's a space where we can all go, everyone's welcome, anyone in the community, where you can just kinda hang? And that idea is kind of lost in today's kind of, at least the US culture. And so the
yeah.
the foundation, hopefully in the future, will not only focus on mental wellness, but going back to your point about that social connectedness of, like, how do we talk to people? How do we
Yeah.
make people feel like they're being heard? And I think going back to Owen, um, one of his gifts that Jeff and I, had talked about for years, I mean, really for years since he was young, was how, how much he listened to people, and how, I mean, even as a parent, I'd come in, I'd be like, "I'm so stressed, let me tell you about this." And everybody's like running around getting, dinner ready and all the things. And he's like, "Mom, tell me about that patient." Like, and he really, like, had this way to kind of almost create a safe space, of like, "I'm not gonna judge you. I just wanna listen to what you have to say." And I kinda thought it was more of a family thing. But then when Owen died, all of his classmates, or a lot of his classmates, wrote, "What do I admire about Owen?" And what was this continuous theme that I'd heard that I was so proud that I never knew, unfortunately, was that he created safe spaces for other people. Owen never said a bad word about anybody. And Owen, I came new to school in 8th grade, and he looked out for me and asked me to eat lunch with him. Are these small little things that Owen never told me about, never bragged about, I never knew, but he was making an impact for other people by creating that safe space. You can tell me anything. It's okay. And I think that a lot of times I've heard people in recovery. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories, and one of the stories was a really cool story. And I asked this guy at the end, I was like, "Could anything have changed? Like, could anything have changed your trajectory?" And I said, "A conversation, if your parent took you a certain place." He said, "Honestly, it was to feel like no matter what, I was loved. No matter what, whether I made a mistake or whether I didn't get a baseball scholarship, no matter what, if I knew I was loved." And I thought that was so cool. And I thought, going back to Owen and, again, that 3 to 5 year hanging house, or whatever we're going to call it, he created these safe spaces for people where no matter what you told him, he wanted to be a psychologist. No matter what, he would have been great.
Mm.
No matter what, whatever you told him, he wasn't gonna be shocked. And he's a kid. I mean, like, he's a kid, and it is some of the teachers actually said that. One of the teachers said something in his card, like, I was walking down the hallway, and no matter what, he would always say, "What's up, coach?" or whatever it was. And that was
Mm.
something that meant something to him. So small. And so that's kind of also the underlying kind of undertones with what I want to create in his honor, is that kinda no matter what you say, we still love you. And not to just say that, but to make people feel that. Because I think sometimes as parents, we say this, or "We love you no matter what," or, "Even if you lose, no matter what," but actually to, like, carry out the actions of showing, really, no matter what. And so that's what, that's another kind of theme.
I
Well,
love that.
yeah, I mean,
Inspiration.
if being able to carry on his legacy through helping other people, whether they're teen or the families, or by extension, potentially thousands, millions of people, and carrying on his legacy through the Goldfinch Foundation is,
Mhm.
I commend you for that. And I love that you didn't take a beat. It was already kind of in the works. And then now you even have
Right.
more of a reason to do it. And so, we will publish and promote the Goldfinch Foundation, but just for people listening, how do they find you?
Well, I found it, the GFF 24. Usually Instagram has really been a way to connect with most people. I mean, I have a website. I guess people don't check websites much. I'm still trying to figure out how to get that because what I'd like to do is start highlighting other artists. Or I mean, last night we were talking about like a guy who wrote a poem about some of his struggles, and so the best way is through Instagram, probably the GFF 24, and 24 is the year Owen died. So it'll always be 24, no matter, even though it's 2025 now. And message me through there, or I have an email, hello@thegff.org. Um, but yeah, so I wanna kind of, Owen's not the only, struggling teen who happens to have some talent, and I think, again, going back to strength and vulnerability, if other people are seeing these other, people in the community that, are sharing their story, I think that's just like this, kind of like the I don't know if y'all are old enough to remember that Prel commercial, "And she'll tell somebody, and she'll tell somebody, and she," and so it's kind of like this, you know, everybody's gonna be doing it now, so that's kind of the best way to, find me for now.
Yes, I remember the Prel commercials.
Yep.
And, Jerry Seinfeld, I use the hard stuff. I use Prel.
Yeah,
Gets your roots right out.
that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, hey, this has been amazing. And just thank you for sharing your story and Owen's story and your family's story,
Mhm.
and not curling up in a ball, and,
Yeah,
and doing, and healing through helping
Yeah.
yeah.
there's no other way to do it. And I can't
Thank
speak
you.
from your exact experience, obviously, but thank you for what you do.
Yes. Thank you
No,
so
I
much,
appreciate it.
Liz.
Yeah, and
And
thanks
thank you
for
for
this
being here.
opportunity. It's been fun to talk to you guys.
Oh, you too. Thank you so
Likewise.
much.